You're tuning in to Voice of the Voiceless. I'm Dan Kovalik, and I'm very happy today to have with me my good friend Maurice Carney from Friends of the Congo. Maurice, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Dan. Dan for having us on. Looking forward to this conversation.
Well, it's a very important issue and one that sadly doesn't get the kind of coverage it deserves. So let's first of all start out again with a basic geography course. We're talking about what is now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, which is in the central part of Africa, in what they call the Great Lake region of Africa. And it has been a country that has gone through incredible hardships. Maurice, tell us what's happening now, and to the extent you want to begin the story somewhere besides now, that's fine. But, you know, tell us what's happening in Congo and why we should care.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'll take off from where you left off about the Congo itself. There are two Congos. There's the Republic of Congo, which is colonized by the French. It's locally known as Congo Brazzaville, representing the capital of that country. And then there's the Democratic Republic of the Congo, also known as Congo Kinshasa, which is a country. It's unique in African history as it relates to the fashion in which it was colonized, because before Congo was colonized, it was given to King Leopold II as his own personal property, where he owned the country outright and plundered the country to the tune of about $1 billion or so, and decimated half of the country's population. Some 10 to 15 million people lost their lives during the 22-year period under the King's War. So that wasn't really the start of Congo's special place in the 500-year travail of Africans, where Africans were extracted from the continent and populated the West to serve as the engine for the development of capitalism. The bulk of the Africans, some 410 of Africans came that were trafficked to the West, came out of the Congo region, which is modern day Gabon, Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, that region. So that area at the heart of the African continent has been central in the 500-year drama unfolding of the usage of African wealth for the development and expansion of capitalism by the West. So Congo has been central in this drama. We're starting with the slave trade, as I shared. Then with colonization, the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, where European powers established their spheres of influence on the African continent. Congo was central as well. It was also called the Congo Conference at the time. And right up to today, where the super exploitation and the plunder of African wealth is central to the advancement of Western technology and to the expansion of capitalism, imperialism. So the story that you say, that the silence, Dan, a large part of it's been around the central role in which Congo has played as a fodder for capitalism. And that's what we see unfolding in the Congo today, where since 1996, an estimated 6 million people have lost their lives as a result, in part, of the extraction of natural resources to feed the technological advances in the West. We're talking about the military industry, we're talking about the aerospace industry, we're talking about the technology industry, we're talking about the consumer electronics industry, we're talking about the automobile industry. All those industries that have made technological advances, such as the cell phones, such as precision instruments in airplanes, such as the batteries that we need to power the green energy sector, the natural resources. A large portion of those resources come out of the Congo. So coltan, for example, is central to electronic devices, cell phones. One U.S. senator had said in a hearing that every American has at least one device in which coltan is found. Cobalt is another key mineral that's vital for the green energy sector, vital for the aerospace industry, it's vital for the military industry. And Congo has the largest reserves and is the largest producer of cobalt in the world. If you add up all of the countries in the world that produce cobalt, they do not equal to the cobalt produced by the Congo. So that's the centrality of the Congo as it relates to modern industries, technological advances, and the development and expansion of capitalism.
And tell me, in a lot of ways, this so-called green energy and technology isn't so green when you get right down to it, when you see how these things are mined. A lot of child labor in Congo, a lot of super exploited labor, but also war has been an essential part. War against Congo and its people has been an essential part of getting to these resources in a cheap fashion, essentially, without having to pay the government. If you can explain how that works, because I think people don't understand that.
Yeah. I would like to take the opportunity to quote Nobel Peace Prize laureate, the Kenyan, Wangari Maathai. She said, when you see these wars, particularly on the African continent, they're almost always about natural resources and who's going to control them. And what we've seen in the Congo is wars of aggression against the Congolese people, led primarily by two U.S. allies, Rwanda, led by Paul Kagame, and Uganda, led by Yoweri Museveni. And those two allies have plundered the Congo. In fact, the United Nations said they're the mafia dons of the Congo, at least since 1996, where they've been armed, financed, trained, provided intelligence by the United States. And these countries have waged a war against the Congolese people. And a central part of that war is the extraction of natural resources that they don't process themselves. Rwanda is not processing the coltan and the tin that they're getting out of the Congo. Uganda is not processing the gold or the timber, but they're extracting it and selling it to global corporations. So that is the nature of the plunder. And because of these materials are stolen from the Congo, then they can be sold for pennies on the dollar in the global market. So that's been the primary source of the plunder as it's related to to corporations and as it's related to neighboring countries and U.S. allies and U.S. proxies. Another aspect of that the plunder is akin to what Naomi Klein talks about in her Disaster Capitalism, in that the country's been devastated by war, so it has to be reconstituted. And in reconstituting, you have these multilateral institutions like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. They come in and they assist, quote unquote, assist the government in setting up structures that would facilitate what they say is the proper management of the resources. So you have the World Bank that came in and wrote the mining laws for the Congo. And those mining laws, of course, favored corporations that were able to go in and exploit Congo's wealth, again, for pennies on the dollar. So you have a situation where you have Naomi Klein's Disaster Capitalism really meeting with Confessions of an Economic Hitman, famous book that talks about how the multilateral institutions work by his John Perkins. So Congo is trapped in that extractive process, trapped in a conflict that's been imposed on the Congolese people. The numbers themselves are devastating as it relates to the number of lives lost. I shared with you 6 million from 1996 to the present, at least 6 million. However, the poverty and the bestial conditions in which Congolese live are unimaginable, especially for a country where economists say there's an estimated $24 trillion worth of wealth in it, where it has a country that has the agricultural capacity to feed almost 2 billion people, which is twice the population of the African continent, a country that has the hydro capacity to provide electricity for the entire African continent. So tremendous amount of wealth that is undergirded by extreme poverty for the overwhelming majority of the Congolese people. You look at any social indicators produced by the United Nations, they have the UN index on social standing, and the Congo winds up at the bottom of that list. So these are the forces that are working against the Congolese people. And really, these are the forces of capitalism, forces of imperialism, forces of neocolonialism, because even the leaders that are elected to office are not the leaders that are elected by the will of the Congolese people. Since the assassination of Lumumba in 1961, and since his election in 1960, where the Congolese people elected Lumumba as their first democratically elected prime minister, each and every leader of the Congo has been determined in one part or another, in some fashion or another, by the United States. There hasn't been a leader that has risen to power since Lumumba that hasn't had the stamp of approval of the United States.
Thank you for tuning in to Voice of the Voiceless. We appreciate you. We hope you appreciate us. If you do appreciate us, please consider joining us on Patreon. And if you do, I'll send you a book like this one of my 6 books. I'll sign it for you and send it to you absolutely for free. This book, I think, is particularly relevant to our show on Congo. I deal a lot with the crisis there and how the U.S. helped create it. So please consider supporting this show. And let me just, if we can talk a little bit about Lumumba, because he's an important figure, not only in Congo, but in the world. In fact, some have described his assassination as the most important assassination of the 20th century, which is saying a lot. And to remind folks, so you had King Leopold's fiefdom over Congo, which killed 10 million people, maybe up to 12 million people. Then Belgium took over Congo from King Leopold. And then you had the first independent leader in Patrice Lumumba, who was elected in 1960, a Congolese leader elected by the Congolese, offering some hope that Congo would become a prosperous independent country, and he is murdered. And by the way, just an interesting point of trivia, the comedian Dave Chappelle, his mother was the secretary for Patrice Lumumba, which people might find interesting. Who's responsible for the death of Patrice Lumumba and really the death of Congolese independence?
Yeah, you laid that out well. With Chappelle, she was invited to Congo by Lumumba, Chappelle's mother, Dr. Yvonne Sion, to head up the Inga Dam. She made it there after his assassination. But as you said, Congo got their independence, right? They fought for it and elected a leader that sought to reclaim Congo's sovereignty, reclaim Congolese authority over its own wealth. And this represented a threat to the United States in particular and to the West in general. So the response to this democratically elected leader by the United States was to mount, according to the US's own documents, recently released declassified documents from the State Department. The response from the United States was to mount the largest covert action in the world at that time against this democratically elected leader. So that was the response from the United States. One of the first countries, if not the first, that the United States, post-independence African countries, the United States intervened in order to not just overthrow Lumumba, this leader, this nationalist, this Pan-Africanist, this internationalist, but really to overturn a democratic system, a system where the will of the people would determine what happens to the wealth of the country. And this is laid out exquisitely, or painstakingly rather, in a book by the chief of station of the CIA, who was responsible for the overthrow of Lumumba, Larry Devlin. The book is called Chief of Station Congo. So he lays out step by step how he manipulated Congolese leaders, bought them off, corrupted them in order to depose Lumumba and really to destroy democracy. So it's not solely a question of Lumumba, because even with Lumumba, he was assassinated on January 17, 1961, but two of his ministers, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito, was assassinated along with him. The people who elected Lumumba, the CIA, the US government recruited exiled Cuban pilots out of Miami who were kicked out of Cuba by Castro. They recruited them and flew them over to the Congo to bomb Congolese who were fighting for their democracy. So it wasn't solely a question of overthrowing and assassinating Lumumba. It's a question of destroying democracy in the Congo and to assure that democracy would not rear its head, where the people of the Congo could make a choice about their future, their resources. The United States then imposed the dictatorship on the Congolese people in Joseph Desiree Mobutu. And the US maintained, not only did they impose the dictatorship, they maintained it, because the Congolese people, of course, resisted and rose up. And every time that happened, the US would come in and rescue Mobutu. So it's really critical that we understand the deep nature of the de-democratizing of the Congo on the part of the United States, who launched the largest covert action in history at that time to make sure that democracy did not rear its head in the Congo, that self-determination did not rear its head in the Congo, that sovereignty did not sprout up in the heart of the African continent. And Larry Devlin put it best in his book. He said that we had to get rid of Lumumba, because if we didn't get rid of Lumumba, not only would we have lost the Congo, we would have lost all of Africa. And he's absolutely right, because at the time, other independence leaders, such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, such as Sekou Touré of Guinea, Keita of Mali, they were forming then what they call the United States of Africa. That is to say, independent nations were unifying under one African banner so that they would be strong and can defend their independence as a unit from Western aggression. So when Congo was pulled out from that process, it weakened the prospect for a United States of Africa, where the wealth of the Congo, the strategic location of the Congo would be utilized for the development of the African continent. So Devlin was absolutely right. It wasn't just about the Congo, it was about Africa. And today it remains the same, that a strong Congo that's controlled by Congolese, who are sovereign, independent, self-determined, nationalists, Pan-Africanists, internationalists, would accelerate the development of the African continent and would represent a tremendous threat to the West, because no longer would the cheap resources be flowing so that Elon Musk can have the cobalt he needs for his electric cars in the Tesla, or that the Israeli Dan Gertler can have the diamonds that he needs for the Israeli diamond market, or Glencore can have the copper. Glencore Corporation, a corporation established by Bill Clinton's friend Mark Rich, can have the resources that it needs to fuel the development of the West. Or for that matter, Eric Prince, who just recently launched a 500 billion, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, equity firm, and top of the list is to the exploitation of Congo's copper. So imagine if all that wealth is controlled by Congolese, by Africans. It would make a tremendous difference for the development of Africa, and also for what the West would have to pay in order to get access to those resources.
And of course, just to remind our viewers, Eric Prince was the founder of the Blackwater Mercenary Organization that we know proved positively committed terrible atrocities against civilians in Iraq, for example. He's also the brother of former Education Secretary Betty DeVos.
DeVos.
Yes.
That's right.
So
exactly.
The connections are incredible. And of course, we have to, you mentioned Bill Clinton, we have to talk about Bill Clinton's role in this. At the time, I think no one says this anymore because of Barack Obama, but at the time, Bill Clinton was called America's first black president, if you remember, which completely bizarre, but people said that because he
played the trombone.
Yeah, and he seemed to be a friend of black people.
And he was a smooth talker.
He claimed to like black people, but he didn't do black people in Congo a lot of favors. What was his role in Congo, and really in starting this war in the 90s that really has not stopped?
Well, the Clinton administration, I'm going to put it all in Clinton because there's a whole host of players. You had Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State. You had Susan Rice, who is Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs.
And she's back in business too. She's back in the White House. Yeah.
Oh, they don't. They
never go away. Right.
It's a incestuous circle. They just keep recirculating them. So they established what they call the Entebbe Principles, and people can do a search on Entebbe Principles. Entebbe is a city in Uganda that Clinton had visited and brought together African leaders in the region. And those principles did several things. One, they put a stamp on certain African leaders and called them the new breed of African leaders, Renaissance leaders, the people who wound up invading the Congo and triggering the millions of lives lost, such as Yoweri Museveni and Paul Kagame. The principles called for a neoliberal beachhead in the heart of the African continent, which those leaders were more than willing to carry out and support. So the leaders that committed the mass atrocities, that committed those crimes in the Congo, were not only fostered by the Clinton administration, they were supported and uplifted. And when international bodies tried to hold them to account or deliver justice, then the United States, starting with Clinton, right through to Bush, right through to Obama, would run diplomatic interference or provide political cover for these mass killers. So in essence, what it has done, it has caused the perpetuation of the violence, of the conflict, of the instability that we see 20 years later in the Great Lakes region of the African continent. I'm being called. I know I have to go pick up my daughter. So unfortunately, I have to wrap it up, but I really would love to come back.
That'd be great. Do you have a few last words for us on your way out? First of all, I do want to say people should watch the movie about the Crisis in the Congo.
Right, Crisis in the Congo, uncovering the truth.
Would you let us show a few clips of that in the broadcast because it's an incredible
please.
film. It's an incredible film.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And people can get the whole film at congojustice.org. What I would encourage people to do in parting then is, one, please try and find out more about the Congo and what's happening there and how it's related to geostrategic interests, particularly of the United States. And they can do that at friendsofthecongo.org. Visit us at friendsofthecongo.org, sign up for our email list, learn more about the Congo. And once you sign up, we have a host of actions that you can take depending on the level of engagement that you would like. But I would direct people to visit our website, friendsofthecongo.org, and also watch the film that you're going to show, Congo, Crisis in the Congo, Uncovering the Truth that can be found at congojustice.org.
Wonderful. Maurice, you're an amazing person. You're doing great work. Hope to be able to spread the word for you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having us on. I wish we had more time. I look forward to coming back. I'd love to come back, especially around some of the major events that we have throughout the year. Congo Week, which kicks off in October, and the commemoration of Lumumba Day. We have every January 17th. So we'd love to come back to talk about those.
We'll have you
actions.
back. Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dad.
Take care. So you have been watching Voice of the Voiceless. I'm Dan Kovalik, and you got to witness my conversation with Maurice Carney from Friends of the Congo. The Congo is one of the most, has one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world and has had one since the 1990s. Bill Clinton was a huge factor in creating that crisis. It's something, though, that you don't hear much about. And to hear someone like Maurice Carney talk about it, I think is a great opportunity. And so if you like Voice of the Voiceless, I hope you keep tuning in. You can find us on Spotify, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you find this program of value to you, please consider joining us on Patreon. Thank you.